Hello, and welcome to our live broadcast of strategies for working from home. We're very excited because this specific post is our Hello World. So what do I mean by this? When I took, logo and basic classes a million years ago, I remember the first program we write is Hello World. So this is our Hello World program and our introduction to these daily sessions. So I'm going to give you a little bit of overview of who is this Senya Myman who's popping up on your live stream, and what is she talking about, and who are the bazillions of incredible coaches and people who are going to be joining her on this program. So I'll give you a little preview of that. And then I'm going to go into two specific tools that you can use literally on every phone call, every Zoom meeting you have after after watching this today. Okay, so who are we? We've been doing this for 60 episodes already. Since this time of staying at home and working from home, our group of coaches has gotten together and said, what can we do to help? There are a lot of things we know about working from home, on everything from stress and resilience to actually just physically. How do you work at home? And how do you work at home when it's you and the kids? So because of that, today you're seeing just me, but you will usually be seeing me and some other guests. That's what we do, is we bring you content on these kinds of things. Today's content, so that you can preview and get ready to play with us. It's going to be a little bit about the content of the fact that this is our Hello World, our first broadcast. And today's tools are going to be about broadcasting versus listening. So when are you so much of a speaker, and when are you actually a listener? Speaking and listening. Thank you. You'll see that we're working out all of our fanciness, and there's a person in the background putting up this tool. And the second tool that we'll go through is a very simple tool of how are you, or hi-lo. And that's literally what is a question that you should be asking at the beginning of your meetings, your Zoom meetings, your phone calls, in order for it to be productive for you in these times. So we'll just drop the banners and we'll just go to what is going on here. I'm going to tell you a story of how all this started. So I had never thought that I would be in any field even remotely related to executive coaching or HR or the field of productivity. So I'd always read these books on the side, like Napoleon Hill. Hi, everyone. It's really good to see you here. I'd always read these kinds of books and posts on the side, Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie. I mean, when I was growing up, when I was a teenager. And then as I turned to business, I just loved math and economics, and never, ever thought I would be in a field that had to do with productivity, success. I always thought that was a hobby. And then something changed in terms of my own education. So my first job was at Morgan Stanley Asset Management. I came out of Harvard with math and economics. And I actually thought most people thought like me. I thought that most people like to take a problem and break it down analytically, look for the best solutions, and go for it. And I actually now know that there are at least two fields in which you're really, really trained to do so. I got an MBA at Stanford, and in MBA training, kind of across the globe, you really are trained to look at what is the problem, what's the range of possible solutions, what's the best solution, if there is one, and how do you go for it. Similarly, I've heard from a lot of friends who are in engineering, one of the best ways to solve a problem is to look at what are the possible solutions, go for the best one, try to carve out the steps and go for it. And then everything changed. I got into this field of positive psychology because I went to UPenn, and I see a few of our UPenn friends here on the session, Masters of Applied Positive Psychology friends. And I realized that there's something just so much bigger than solving a problem. You can solve a problem all day long, but if that's what you're doing, you may not be resonating with the people that you think you're solving a problem with. So my story is that I made a 180-degree change from this analytical, mathy, economicsy mindset to this mindset of much more open-minded. I actually think there's a ton of open-mindedness in mathematics and in proofs, a ton. But open-minded in terms of, what does it mean when someone says something? Could it mean this, or could it mean that? So that's my own personal story. And then just under a decade ago, I was working as a coach when one of my client companies asked, can you do some coaching en masse? Do you have access to other coaches? Do you know great coaches? And boy, do I know great coaches. So as a coaching company, we are Silicon Valley Change Executive Coaching. you'll see the little brand right there in the corner is My Coach by Silicon Valley Change. That's just sort of an approachable brand, My Coach. And we grew to 5 coaches, then 13 coaches, then 39 coaches, and now we're growing northwards even more. Why? Because these are different coaches that bring different experiences to the companies that we're working with. So that's the story of how we came to this. So if you are interested in any of these topics, then tune in every day at 11 a.m. Pacific for 20 minutes, just like today. Topics such as presentation skills, especially presenting in this virtual world, racial equity. We have a few of our coaches that specialize in this, especially one who is in high demand right now. Stress and resilience. These are the kinds of things that you may not think about unless you're actually sort of reminded to think about it. Even parenting, we have suggestions on parenting and working at the same time. And working with coworkers, that's probably one of the biggest things that comes up. It's things like when my co-author Margaret Greenberg and I were writing our book about 5 years ago, I'll show you the book. When we were writing our book, one of the great questions that we got asked, it's profit from the positive. Margaret's my co-author and really good friend. We wrote this book, and when we were writing it, we reached out to the CEOs, the CXOs that we had coached, and we asked, what are your biggest burning questions about business? And one person said, how do I get everybody around me to believe that I'm right? No, just kidding. But really, how do I? So we spend a lot of effort working on how to influence how people think, how to have conversations in which people are, to bring people over to our side if that's appropriate, or to actually get brought over to their side if that's appropriate. So what I'm telling you is if any of this interests you, come join us. All right. Blank slate. We are now going to go into the 2 tools for today. Again, this is our first time broadcasting to you in this format. So let's talk about the tool of listening and speaking. So this specific tool, listening and speaking, in academic background, I worked on my PhD and got my PhD in organizational behavior at Stanford Graduate School of Business. And I love research. So I'm one of those people that loves to dig into it. And you actually might be too, if you're listening here. The field of listening and speaking is referred to in research as inquiry and advocacy. Inquiry, so asking, and that's a little bit like the listening. The listening is like asking people, and advocacy, so advocating your point of view. So I will take, this is going to be the first interactive part, so I hope you're ready at your keyboards. I will take comments on what you think a good ratio is of inquiry to advocacy. So let's talk about it as asking questions and speaking. I call it listening and speaking, but asking questions and speaking. What is we're going to keep this posted here the whole time. What is a good, let me see if I can see the comments. How about Mandy? You tell me in the private chat if you're seeing. Oh, I'm seeing the comments. Great. Okay, super. So what do you think is a good ratio of asking your colleagues questions and of listening? Do you think you should be asking questions 100 more times than you're talking? Sorry, I said that wrong. Or do you think you should be talking 100 times more than you're asking questions? All right, we're getting a couple of comments. So you're saying asking questions 90% of the time and talking 10% of the time. I like you. You would be really fun to hang out with. I'll see if there are some other comments on this. So what should be that ratio? Think about it for yourself for a moment. Who do you like to interact with? If you're interacting with a colleague, do you prefer to interact with somebody who is asking about you most of the time, or who is speaking most of the time, or somewhat in the middle? What do you prefer? What works for you? Okay, here comes the big reveal. The reveal is that research shows that the best working relationships are when that inquiry to advocacy ratio is 1-to-1. So I love what you're saying, the person who just said 90 to 10. And especially what's cool about that is that that's what we try to do in coaching. So this is sort of a weird format for me. I love interviewing people and I love asking people, which is why you're going to see me asking you a lot more questions. The research answer is 1-to-1. So if you go into a meeting and you're finding that you're doing 90% of the talking, may I suggest that just for your meetings today on Monday or for your meetings tomorrow, that you would try a different way. So try you asking about half the time and you talking about half the time, or you listening half and talking half. as an option. I'm going to tell you one story about this. A person that I once coached, a leader that I coached, I will refer to almost all of the leaders that I coach as, oh, thank you for more comments. Awesome. Good to see you. Almost all the leaders that I coach, I will refer to them by code name. I'll never give even a hint of what industry they're working in or who they are. So I'll just talk about a leader that I coached whose code name will be Joe. When I was working with Joe, one of the problems that Joe had is, now this is in the time when we were all in the office. And by the way, as an aside, I highly encourage you to drink your water while you're listening to me here. Joe would get caught in the hall by some of the people that worked on his team. And he would get caught and ask, oh, Joe, I need to talk to you about this, and let's do this, and here's this, and just get a lot of content thrown at him. And Joe was speaking with me and said, I want to be responsive. I want to be a good manager. I want to be there for this person, but it's just so much content, and I'm not really sure what this person is asking for. So we worked with Joe and talked about what kinds of things do people usually request of him, what's helpful for a team member when Joe is their manager. And we found out that people usually want two things from Joe. They either would like Joe to make a decision, or they want to give Joe some information. So either they're talking to Joe and they say, Joe, I've come up with all these things that I really need you to make a decision on this. Or they're updating him or giving him information. So one thing, as his team members were coming up to him in the hall, one thing that he decided to try differently that ended up working for him is near the beginning of that discussion, he would say, hey, is this a decision you'd like me to make? Or is this an update you're giving me? Now, granted, it could be other types of things, but in his case, these tended to be the most common things. And that calmed everybody. It calmed the person who was speaking to him, it calmed Joe, and it focused that specific discussion. Was it a decision or was it an updated information? So coming back, you may think that doesn't quite fit with listening and speaking, but coming back to this, Joe did one small piece of asking so that he could listen better, like that person who said 90% of asking questions. Joe did a little bit of asking, and because of that, that person spoke. And so when Joe spoke, he was completely relevant and completely on point to that person. Okay, that was tool number one. I'm telling you, we just rocked through these. Okay, tool number two. Tool number two is going to sound really silly in some ways, but it's really deep. So here's tool number two. Tool number two is the question that you ask when you start a meeting. So I will tell you a tool that's pretty useful in these times, but I'll also tell you a tool that's just a little bit deeper that you might enjoy. I know you're going to think this is kind of funny, but the simple tool is really, how are you? I'm a coach and I have access to over 100 questions that I use regularly. But one of the simplest ones is, how are you? Let me tell you a story about this. A person that I'm coaching, and let's call this person Emily. Emily has said that when she's running her team and when they're having team meetings, whether one-on-one or in a bigger team, at the beginning of these meetings, she's found that almost always, let's say it's a 1-hour meeting, the first 10 minutes is about what's going on. How are you? What's going on? And she says, it's not like HR told us to do this. It's just that we really came into this and we said, hey, this is what's going on. Everything is shifting every day. Nobody knows what's going on personally, professionally. If we have this discussion near the beginning, it almost levels the field and it sets our own expectations about how we're doing. Even a little bit of a hint of what level of stress we're at. So I encourage you to try one or both of those things, a different combination of listening, speaking, or just asking, how are you? Now, and I always like to, this is almost like, when you're walking in place during an aerobics class, but then when you're jumping for the high intensity, wow, everything shook, my whole computer shook. The ninja level of this is asking a high-low question. And there are more, and I'll show you more, but high-low is at the beginning of a call. Let's say there are 3 other people in the room, just asking what's been a high this week and what's been a challenge. What's been something that's gone really well and what's been something that's been challenging. Because again, you're normalizing it and you're giving your own answers. So the reason I'm saying this to you is because you're likely an amazing manager already. If you're watching this, you probably care about managing people. So I'm just giving you the simplest, quickest way that you can make a quick change, even in your next meeting, that could change the tone a little bit. There you have it. This is our hello to you, and we look forward to seeing you every day at 11 a.m. Pacific. We've given you 2 tools, listening and speaking. And what ratio do you want to play around with, given that the research ratio of effective teamwork is 1-to-1? And we've given you just a question at the beginning of meetings, encouraging you to say this, how are you? You might have been wanting to, but go for it. Just go for it. Or trying this high-low. What's something that's gone really well? And what's a challenge you've had? Thank you so much. This was the formal part of this live broadcast. We're here every day at 11 a.m. Pacific. I'm going to quiet down the screen right now, and I'll take 1 or 2 questions if we have them. And if we don't, then we're off to tomorrow for our 11 a.m. tomorrow. So I will be quiet for a moment for you to type in any questions that you may have. And one thing that I want to ask you, what is your takeaway from today? What are you taking away as something that you're going to do? It could have been something I said. It could have been a thought you had. What is something you're taking away? And for those of you who are writing what you're going to be taking away and have actually written it, then please tell me what else you'd like to see in these. For example, we've gotten comments that we'd like to see more content on meditation and more about stress reduction and more about presenting. One of our coaches, specifically Shannon Polly, on presenting like a rock star. That's her strong field. Okay, so I'm hearing here that something that someone's taking away is the 2 tools. Thank you so much for that. Great, and we've got 1 question, and this will probably be our wrap-up question, and then we'll see you again tomorrow. Okay, so here is the question. The question is, when I have a large team meeting, and can you tell me how large? Are you talking 10 people? Or are you talking 50 people? When I have a large team meeting, how do I get a feel from everyone? Great question. 2 ways. It just depends how large. Can you tell me? Talking about getting closer to one-on-one. Okay, very cool. So sort of like between a one-on-one and a larger team meeting. If you mean something specific, very large, let me know. I would suggest that if you're about, okay, that's a very specific number. So it's just to not to say exactly what this person said, it's between 10 and 15, but it's a very specific number. Great, so you have 30, I said it, I'm sorry, it was right in front of me. So you have 10 to 15 people in your meeting, and you want to get a feel from everybody. Here's how you do it. My colleague Margaret showed me this. Again, my colleague, good friend and colleague with whom we wrote Profit from the Positive. She showed me this, and I've been using this for years. We call it the lit match test. So imagine that you're holding a lit match and you have to say something before the match burns down to your fingers. So you can introduce it at that. You could say, hey, I'd just like to do a pulse check of one fun thing that's happened for you this week. It could be personal or professional. Could we do it as a lit match approach? So as if you're holding a lit match, and say it before the match runs out. That's an awesome entryway. And I would say in this situation where it's between 10 and 15 people, I would recommend more of that. What's one thing that's happened well? Or, if you tend to talk more about the projects, and this would be a very weird thing for you to ask what's gone well at all, what's one good thing that's happened on the project? Or what's one good thing that's happened with you and your teams? So you could keep it very work focused as well. What's one good thing? And if you give people this lit match and also get everybody to you say it yourself, and then everybody says it with this lit match, then you've gotten these 10 to 15 answers so quickly, and you've got it at the beginning. And I'll tell you one last closing story. Thank you, that worked for you. Okay, very cool. A friend of mine was in a writer's program. Now, just so you know, artists, writers, sort of really, really creative people, they can be really critical of each other, and that's very valuable because they're improving and they're learning. But she told me something brilliant. I still think about it to this day. If you're in a group, let's say you're in this 15-person group, as long as you seed the beginning of the call or the meeting with something positive, that kind of tends to percolate. It's almost like you're dropping a pebble and those ripples go. So she used to try to be in this group. She used to try to, at the beginning, say something really positive about the work that everybody was discussing. So again, that's one specific situation, but with these 10 to 15, just one quick thing. What's one good thing that's happened on this project? Or what's one good thing that's happened personally or professionally? I will tell you all, and I'm coming right up to 20 minutes, so I'm really excited that we made it in that time. My most exciting thing is that I really feel like I'm having this conversation with you. So I'll read off just a couple of things here. One person is saying what they get out of today is asking whether it's a decision or an update. So sometimes this person walks away without knowing what to do with that information. Thank you. So this is exactly how I want to keep doing this. And you're going to start seeing me interviewing other people. I really want this to be about you and me talking about something. And I'll just read off two others. And somebody is saying, this is great because I'm learning about stories that I can tell. I like what you're saying. You're going all Steven Spielberg on me. I like it. Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you. See you again at 11 a.m. Pacific every day, Monday to Friday. We're going to have guests on this week, so you will see who they are as you keep joining us. All the best. See you again.